You think you're falling asleep, but something else is waking up. Your limbs are still. Your room is quiet. Maybe you're lying in the same bed you've had for years, but as your eyes drift shut, a slow shift begins, not in the room, but in your mind. Something ancient, something hidden, something primal. Sleep is supposed to be peace, restoration, the place where your body repairs, where your thoughts settle, where dreams drift through the unconscious like wisps of fog. But not always. Sometimes what comes for you isn't fog. It's a storm. You feel it start subtly. A strange image, an uneasy setting. You're not in your room anymore. You're standing in an empty hallway, or running through a forest that shouldn't be there. You try to move, but you're heavy, slow. Something is wrong. A noise behind you. A face you almost recognize, twisted into something else. And then it hits. The nightmare doesn't knock. It crashes through the walls of your psyche like a wave. Overwhelming, total. Fear, panic, confusion. You try to run, but you can't. You scream, but there's no sound. You know this isn't real. But that doesn't matter, because in that moment, it is real. Nightmares aren't just dreams that go bad. There's something else entirely. They live in the parts of your brain you don't control. The parts that don't need your permission to show you what you're most afraid of. They bypass logic. They ignore reason. They dive straight into emotion, symbolism, and memory. They don't ask what you're afraid of. They show you. Nightmares aren't random. They're precise, surgical, customized to you. But why? Why does the brain, this beautiful, complex machine responsible for imagination, creativity, intelligence, suddenly turn on you when you're at your most vulnerable? That's what this video is here to explore. Not just what nightmares are, but why they happen, what causes them, what they might be trying to tell you, and most unsettling of all, whether they're entirely psychological or if something else is influencing them. Because here's the part most people miss. Nightmares aren't always the same. They adapt, they evolve, they respond to you, they remember. If you've ever had a recurring nightmare, you know the feeling. It's not just a repeat, it's a continuation. The hallway is longer than last time. The thing that was chasing you is closer. The dream remembers what scared you before, and it turns up the volume. And sometimes, nightmares follow you out of sleep. You wake up with your heart pounding, sweat on your neck, your throat dry from a scream you never made. You look around and tell yourself it's over, but for a moment, just a moment, you're not so sure. You check the closet. You turn on the light. You sleep with your back against the wall, because some part of you, some small silent part, doesn't believe it was just a dream. Over the next hour, we're going to walk through the science, psychology, and mystery of nightmares. We'll look at what your brain is doing when you're unconscious. We'll explore common symbols, terrifying archetypes, and real stories of people haunted by their dreams. We'll dive into trauma, folklore, and what modern research says about dream control. And in the final chapters, we'll touch on the darkest questions of all. What if nightmares aren't just personal? What if some are shared? What if they come from somewhere else? Not all dreams belong to you. Not all thoughts inside your mind start with you. You may be asleep, but something else is very much awake. Chapter 2. What a nightmare really is. You've had one. Everyone has. The dream that shakes you awake. The one that makes you sit up gasping, sweating, eyes darting around your dark room to make sure what you saw isn't still there. A nightmare. We use the word casually, but what actually is a nightmare? Where does it come from? Why does it feel so real, so much more intense than any other kind of dream. Let's begin with the basics. A nightmare is a vivid, disturbing dream that triggers strong negative emotions, usually fear, panic, sadness, or anxiety. Most often, it occurs during REM sleep, the deepest part of your sleep cycle, where dreams are most immersive and surreal. But what separates a nightmare from a bad dream is that it usually wakes you up. That's not a coincidence. That's a built-in alarm. Your brain, in its infinite complexity, is sounding a psychological fire bell. Something in your dream becomes so overwhelming, so emotionally charged, that it forces you to exit sleep. The dream doesn't end, you're pulled out of it. Let's get technical for a moment. During REM sleep, your brain is far from restful. It's incredibly active. In fact, brain scans show levels of neural activity during REM that are almost identical to wakefulness. But certain key parts of the brain behave very differently during this time. The amygdala, the part responsible for processing fear, threat, and emotion. It's firing at full power. It lights up like a warning flare. And the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain that helps with logic, reason, and impulse control. That part is mostly offline. So during a nightmare, your brain is essentially telling you something is wrong, you're in danger. But your logic center can't respond with, no, this isn't real. This doesn't make sense. The result? You believe. You believe the chase, the fall, the monster in the corner. Even when it's absurd, you react to it as if it's happening in the real world. Your heart races, your breathing becomes shallow, stress hormones surge, your muscles twitch against the paralysis that REM sleep imposes. You are experiencing fear on a neurological level, and then you wake up, gasping, disoriented, maybe remembering everything, maybe only a flash of it, but your body remembers. The fear lingers, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours, sometimes it follows you for days. Nightmares are emotional echoes. But where do they come from? Some are rooted in trauma. If you've been through something life-threatening, emotionally shattering, or deeply disturbing, your brain may replay those moments again and again while you sleep, trying to process them or keep you alert for them happening again. This is especially common in those with PTSD, where the line between memory and nightmare is razor thin. But not all nightmares are trauma-based. Some come from stress, deadlines, arguments, grief, uncertainty. Your conscious mind might try to suppress it, but your subconscious can't. It leaks out in symbols. You're drowning, but it's not water. It's responsibility. You're running, but you're not chased by a person. It's time. You're screaming, but no one hears you. Because in waking life, no one is listening. Nightmares are messages. Brutal, messy, terrifying messages. And then there are nightmares that seem to come from nowhere. No obvious stressor, no memory, just darkness, shadows, an intense sense that something is watching, something ancient, something wrong. These are harder to explain. Are they the mind's way of confronting the unknown? Or are they born from something deeper, something inherited, passed down through evolutionary memory? Some scientists believe nightmares evolved as threat rehearsal mechanisms, ways for early humans to simulate danger and prepare for it. The predator in your dream wasn't just fantasy. It was practice. Practice for when the real thing came in the night. But the thing is, some nightmares show us things we've never seen, places we've never been, people who don't exist, languages we don't speak. And that raises the question, if nightmares are made from memory and emotion, where do these unfamiliar fragments come from? You'll hear people say, it was just a dream. But nightmares don't feel like just a dream. They feel targeted, designed, intentional. And sometimes, no matter how much you want to believe it's over when you wake up, something about it stays with you. A detail, a voice, a feeling, like the dream is waiting for you to come back. So if you want to understand nightmares, don't start with fantasy. Start with your biology, your brain, your fears, and ask yourself one simple question. What is your mind trying to show you when you're no longer in control? Chapter 3. Fear while your body is frozen, you're awake, or at least you think you are. Your eyes open, but everything feels wrong. The room looks familiar but distant. Too still. You try to move, your arm, your leg, your fingers, and nothing happens. Your chest feels tight. You want to scream, but no sound comes out. And then you feel it, something in the room with you. A presence, standing in the corner, watching, waiting. You've entered the space between dreaming and waking. And this is where fear becomes something else entirely. This is sleep paralysis. For centuries, people believed it was a supernatural event, a demon pressing on your chest, a ghost holding you down, a witch riding your body through the night. And if you've ever experienced it, you understand why. It doesn't feel psychological. It feels physical. It feels external. It feels real. But science has a name for it. REM atonia, intruding on consciousness. In other words, your brain wakes up before your body does. You become aware. But the paralysis meant to keep you from acting out your dreams hasn't lifted yet. You're trapped between worlds. Most people will experience this at least once in their life. Some never again. But others, they suffer from it regularly, night after night. And what makes it worse is that they don't just feel paralyzed. They see things, dark shapes in the room, shadows sitting on their chest, figures at the foot of the bed that vanish when morning comes. And no matter how many times it happens, it never gets easier. Some scientists say it's a hallucination, your half-awake brain trying to fill in sensory blanks. You expect something to be there, so it conjures a figure. But others argue that the presence is always the same, that people across cultures, across continents, across centuries, all describe the same being, a tall shadow, humanoid, faceless, silent. What do you do with a dream that visits strangers the same way? But sleep paralysis is only one part of the picture. Let's go deeper. During REM sleep, your body enters complete muscular paralysis. This is a protective mechanism, one that stops you from hurting yourself or others while dreaming. But here's the terrifying part. Your mind is still completely capable of sensing. You feel your heartbeat. You hear the ticking clock. You know you're trapped, and your fear builds with every second. Now combine that with a nightmare. You're running from something in your dream. It's chasing you. You're sweating, you're screaming, and then you wake up, but you can't move, and you feel that whatever was chasing you, is in the room now. That's not just terror. That's psychological layering. A merging of dream and reality so complete, your brain doesn't know the difference. For a few moments, you are still inside the nightmare. Only now, you can see your ceiling. This is the place where many people begin to question reality. They ask, how can a dream still hurt me after I wake up? Why do I feel watched? Why do I remember details I never consciously imagined? Some nightmares don't just haunt the mind, they haunt the body. Waking up from a particularly intense one can leave you disoriented for hours. You forget names, you forget what day it is. You check the mirror, expecting to see something else. You feel like something followed you out. And in some cultures, that's exactly what they believe happens. In Japan, this state is called kanashibari, a supernatural strangling. In Newfoundland folklore, it's the old hag, a spirit that sits on your chest and drains your energy. In parts of Africa, it's believed that a jealous ancestor or spirit has slipped into your dreamscape to deliver a warning or a punishment. These aren't just stories. These are consistent cultural experiences, describing the exact same phenomenon in different languages with different beliefs, but the same fear. Why would people from opposite sides of the world describe the same shadow? Maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's biology, or maybe there is something that waits for you when your body is frozen, something that knows you can't move, something that watches while you sleep, and waits for the perfect moment to show itself. Not all nightmares end when you wake up. Some are just beginning. Chapter 4. The most common nightmares, and what they really mean. Nightmares are rarely random. They might feel chaotic, unreal, ridiculous. But beneath the disjointed scenes and impossible imagery, there's often a clear message, buried in metaphor, wrapped in fear. Some symbols are so universal, they appear in dreams across every culture, every age group, every belief system. Whether you're 5 years old or 50, whether you live in a city or a desert, chances are your mind has shown you the exact same horror someone else has seen in their sleep. Let's break them down. The 5 most common nightmares people report around the world, and what they might be telling you. 1. Falling. You're in the air, on a ledge, on a rooftop. You lose your balance. There's that moment, the sickening drop in your stomach, and then you're falling. Down and down and down. And just before you hit the ground, you wake up. Falling is one of the most common nightmares ever recorded, and it usually signals loss of control. Psychologists believe it represents anxiety, insecurity, or fear that something in your waking life is slipping. A job, a relationship, your own identity. Your mind doesn't say, "I feel overwhelmed." It shows you the physical sensation of letting go. 2. Being chased. Something is after you. Maybe it has no face. Maybe you don't know why it wants you. But it does. And no matter how fast you run, your legs feel slow, like moving through water. You're trying to escape, but the thing chasing you is always just behind you. Being chased is almost always a sign of avoidance. There's something in your life you don't want to face. A confrontation, a truth, a decision. Your mind turns it into a hunter. Something you fear because deep down, you know it will eventually catch you. Some say the dream ends when you finally stop running, when you turn around, when you face it. 3. Teeth falling out. You're speaking, chewing, or smiling, and suddenly your teeth begin to fall out, crumbling into your hands, dropping onto the floor, one by one. No pain, just a sickening sensation of helplessness. This nightmare has been reported for centuries, and while it can be tied to real-life dental anxiety, it's more often linked to powerlessness, aging, or fear of change. Your teeth are part of your appearance, your identity, your ability to communicate. Losing them in a dream is a deep symbolic fear that you're losing control over how the world sees you. Sometimes it's triggered by feelings of embarrassment or loss of confidence. The subconscious shames you without saying a word. 4. Being trapped. You're in a room with no doors, a hallway that goes nowhere, a coffin, a cave. You try to scream but no one hears. You try to move but the walls close in. You're trapped by something unseen, or maybe by your own mind. This nightmare is tied to claustrophobia, of course, but more often it reflects emotional entrapment. You feel stuck in your job, in your relationship, in your own thoughts. You feel silenced, ignored, pressured by expectations. The dream becomes a prison, and sometimes you put yourself in it. 5. Losing a loved one. You see them, a parent, a partner, a child, and then suddenly they're gone. Sometimes they disappear. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they don't recognize you, like you're a stranger to the person you love most. These dreams are deeply emotional, often tied to grief, abandonment, or unresolved trauma. But they're also warnings. Sometimes we dream of loss when we feel disconnected in real life. Our minds don't show us conversations we missed. They show us absence. Some people report waking up crying. Others feel numb for the rest of the day. Because in the dream, it was real. And your brain has a hard time letting go of that kind of pain. These common nightmares are like recurring patterns, the mind's language of fear. And while the symbols might be shared, the meanings are always personal. A fall means something different to someone with financial stress than it does to someone with a dying parent. The mind uses metaphor because it has to. It's speaking to a part of you that doesn't respond to logic. It speaks in sensation, in shadow, in story. But here's the unsettling part. Sometimes people have these nightmares before the triggering event occurs. They dream of death before the phone call. They dream of falling before the diagnosis. They see the face of someone they've never met, only to recognize them in real life later. Coincidence? Premonition? Or is the unconscious mind more powerful than we think? If nightmares are symbolic, and they sometimes come before the trauma, then maybe they're not just memories. Maybe they're warnings. Or maybe they're echoes from a version of reality your conscious mind hasn't reached yet. Chapter 5. Nightmares and mental illness. Nightmares don't just happen in isolation. They often walk hand in hand with something deeper. A waking struggle, one you may or may not fully recognize. For many people, nightmares are more than frightening dreams. They're symptoms, signals, side effects of a mind in pain. Let's be clear. Everyone has bad dreams. Stress, grief, even a late meal can trigger a restless night. But when nightmares become frequent, repeating, or severely distressing, they're often tied to something clinical. Something happening in your mental and emotional systems, not just your dreamscape. Nightmares are common among people with anxiety disorders. That may not surprise you. When your waking thoughts are dominated by worry, overthinking, fear of loss, or dread of the future, it's no wonder your dreams begin to mirror that emotional chaos. But what's interesting is that the content of these nightmares doesn't always match the exact cause. You might be terrified of social situations by day and find yourself drowning in a dark lake at night. Your mind isn't replaying events, it's translating them. And it doesn't always speak in words. For those with depression, nightmares tend to be heavy, slow, hopeless. These dreams often involve themes of isolation, failure, or emotional numbness. It's not always monsters or chase scenes. Sometimes the horror comes from nothingness, being ignored, trapped, forgotten. You're in a crowd, but no one sees you. You cry out, but your voice echoes back alone. For people with obsessive-compulsive disorder, nightmares can take the shape of repetition, loops, rituals gone wrong. You lock the door again and again, but it still opens. You wash your hands until your skin bleeds, and the dirt never fades. You forget a task in your dream over and over. The anxiety isn't just about danger, it's about imperfection. Then there's PTSD, perhaps the clearest link between nightmares and mental illness. Post-traumatic stress disorder is deeply tied to sleep disruption. Some studies suggest up to 70% of people with PTSD suffer from chronic nightmares. These aren't just symbolic fears. These are relived experiences. You wake up in the place you swore you'd escaped. You hear the explosion. You smell the smoke. You feel the hands on you. The moment your conscious mind has tried to bury comes roaring back at night, unfiltered. And here's the most heartbreaking part. The nightmare often becomes predictable. You begin to expect it. You go to sleep already anxious, already bracing for impact. Sleep becomes a place of dread, not rest. Nightmares in this form aren't just disruptive, they're destructive. They erode mental health, deepen insomnia, and reinforce trauma. For some, the only escape is avoiding sleep entirely, and that, of course, comes at a cost. There's also a condition known as nightmare disorder, a clinical diagnosis given when nightmares are frequent, intense, and impair your ability to function. It's more than being scared. It's recurring terror that shapes your waking life. It can lead to panic attacks, substance abuse, even suicidal ideation. You begin to fear the night and what waits inside it. But there's another side of this story, one that's often overlooked. Some people report that their mental illness began with nightmares, not the other way around. They weren't anxious, they weren't depressed, but they started having violent, disturbing dreams, and then their waking world began to crack. Is it coincidence? Or are nightmares sometimes the first symptom? A warning sign from the unconscious, flagging something the conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. And here's a more uncomfortable question. What if your nightmares are keeping you sick? Let's say your trauma is buried deep. You've survived the worst, you're healing. But every night, your brain drags you back. It forces you to relive what you can't forget. That repetition may prevent real recovery. Your mind is trying to process the past, but it's stuck, replaying the same pain again and again, like a broken record. So what do? There are treatments, therapies that help reduce or reframe nightmares. Techniques like image rehearsal therapy, where patients rewrite their dream while awake, change the ending, remove the threat, take back control. There's lucid dream training, where people learn to recognize the dream while it's happening and consciously alter it. There's medication too, but it's not always effective. Because sometimes the real battle isn't with the nightmare, it's with what caused it. Mental illness doesn't end when the sun sets. It doesn't rest while you sleep. And nightmares, they're often its most honest expression. The mind, uncensored, unpolished, raw. If you suffer from them, you're not weak. You're not broken. Your brain is trying, desperately, to make sense of something it can't explain during the day, so it shows you at night. Chapter 6. The same nightmare, over and over again. You've seen this place before. You recognize the hallway. Long, narrow, flickering with lights that never stay on. You've turned this corner. You've opened that door. You know what's behind it, even before you reach the handle. And yet, every time you dream it, you hope the ending will be different, but it never is. Welcome to the recurring nightmare. These are the dreams that come back night after night, week after week, sometimes over the course of years. They follow you across childhood, into adulthood, through relationships, heartbreaks, job changes. Like shadows you can't shake. They change just enough to stay unfamiliar. But the fear, that always stays the same. For some, it's being chased, always by something they never quite see. For others, it's a scene of disaster, fire, flood, plane crash, that plays on repeat. For many, it's simply being back somewhere they swore they'd never return. A childhood home, a hospital room, a place that doesn't exist on any map. These dreams are not random. They are the unresolved files in your psychological system, emotional memory trapped in a loop. Your conscious mind moves on, but your subconscious doesn't forget. Some theories say recurring nightmares are the result of unfinished emotional processes. You've experienced something, trauma, grief, betrayal, and instead of confronting it, you've buried it, suppressed it. But the human brain doesn't delete pain. It archives it. And sometimes it reruns the tape until you finally watch it all the way through. But the strange thing is, these nightmares don't always replay exactly. Often, they evolve. The monster gets closer. The hallway gets longer. The voice on the phone says something new. It's as if the dream is aware of itself, as if it's waiting for you to respond, to act differently this time. That's the unsettling part. These recurring nightmares don't feel like memories. They feel like conversations, and they're not one-sided. You scream in the dream, but no one comes. You try to run, but the road is blocked. And then one night, you fight back. You grab the thing chasing you. You turn and speak. You open the door you've always avoided, and the dream stops. Sometimes for good, sometimes just long enough to make you forget how bad it was, until it returns again, slightly changed, slightly worse. Why do some people suffer recurring nightmares for years, while others never have them at all? Part of it comes down to sensitivity, not just emotional, but neurological. Some brains are more sticky when it comes to traumatic or emotionally intense information. Others may have stronger defense mechanisms, denial, distraction, mental redirection. But for people who feel everything deeply, the brain holds on, and it replays what hurt, even if you didn't know it hurt at the time. What makes this more disturbing is how many people report the same nightmare with eerie detail, even when they've never met, never spoken, and live in entirely different parts of the world. A staircase that leads nowhere, a child crying in a locked room, a city that floods as the sky turns black. These shared elements lead some to believe recurring nightmares are not just personal, they're collective. That we, as a species, carry psychological residue from our ancestors, a sort of emotional DNA. Ancient fears passed down through the generations, the dark, unspoken parts of our story surfacing as symbols in sleep. Others go further. They believe recurring nightmares may be echoes, glimpses of other versions of reality, alternate timelines, lives you didn't live but somehow still remember. You die in the dream, again and again, and wonder why it feels so familiar, so real, like it actually happened. Is that just your imagination, or a memory you weren't supposed to keep? Still others think these dreams may be messages, spiritual, metaphysical, even paranormal, warnings, lessons, punishments. Some people swear that their recurring nightmare ended only when they changed something in their waking life, cut someone off, faced the truth, forgave someone or themselves. And suddenly, the dream was gone. So what are these nightmares trying to tell you? Only you can know. But here's what's certain. If your mind keeps showing you the same scene over and over again, it's not done with you yet. Something has not been said. Something has not been faced. Recurring nightmares don't happen to you. They happen for you, not to punish, but to reveal. And when the same shadow keeps returning, maybe it's not trying to hurt you. Maybe it's trying to say, look at me, one more time, until you see what I really am. Chapter 7. When nightmares follow you into reality, you wake up, you're in your room. The nightmare is over. You tell yourself that, over and over as your heartbeat slows and your breathing returns to normal. You reach for your phone, the clock, the light. You ground yourself in what's real, but something still feels off. There's a heaviness in the air, a weight in your chest. Your mind is sharp, but the fear hasn't faded. You saw something in that dream, and it didn't leave with you. Sometimes nightmares don't stay where they belong. Sometimes they follow you into the light. These are the dreams that bleed into reality, the ones that don't end when your eyes open. You carry them into the day, like ash on your skin. The images, the voices, the sensations, they linger, and sometimes they show up again, not in sleep, but in real life. Déjà vu. A person you've never met before says something from your dream, word for word. A street you've never walked looks exactly like the one you ran through night after night. You see a shadow in your peripheral vision that matches the shape of the thing that chased you. Coincidence? Maybe. But ask around. You'll hear stories. People who dream about buildings that don't exist, only to find them years later on vacation. People who lose someone in a nightmare, and then lose them in real life days later. People who dream of falling through ice, and wake up gasping for air, with water in their throat, and no explanation. These experiences are called dream reality transpositions. Moments when emotional or sensory content from sleep overlaps with waking consciousness. Scientists call it a form of sleep inertia or hypnopompic confusion. But for the person experiencing it, that explanation doesn't help, because it doesn't feel like confusion. It feels like the dream isn't over. Sometimes it's not about sensory memory. Sometimes it's something worse. False awakenings. You've had this one. You think you've woken up. You sit up in bed. You walk to the bathroom. You flip the switch. The lights don't turn on. Then you wake up for real. False awakenings are among the most disturbing forms of nightmare. You escape the terror. You breathe. You think you're safe. And then you realize you're still dreaming. And this time, you're not sure you'll ever actually wake up. In layered dreams like this, your brain constructs multiple levels of reality, each more convincing than the last. It's the perfect psychological trap. And for people with chronic nightmares, it can feel like they've been dreaming for years, in a loop they can't break. There are even cases where someone dreamed of waking up dozens of times, only to find something slightly off each time. The clock ticking backward, the photos on their wall replaced, their face in the mirror wrong. That's not a bad dream. That's existential dread stitched into your consciousness. But the deepest nightmare bleed-through happens in those who say they never really left the dream. They wake up, but something in them doesn't feel fully returned. Their personality changes. They can't describe it, only that something shifted, a disconnection, a fracture. Psychologists might call it derealization, a common response to trauma, stress, or dissociation. But what if for some people it isn't a disorder? What if something changed while they were dreaming? What if they crossed into a version of reality that wasn't quite the one they started in? These are fringe theories, yes, but they're growing. Some researchers explore the idea of dream-induced memory overwriting, the possibility that certain nightmares could cause changes in how we store identity, not just memory, that a particularly vivid or emotional dream might reassign parts of our psychological baseline. Others go further. They ask, what if dreams are a kind of travel, not physical, not astral, but mental, consciousness brushing up against alternate timelines, parallel experiences, alternate yous, when you wake up with a feeling that something followed you? Maybe you're right. Maybe the nightmare didn't end. Maybe you left the door open. Real or imagined, the emotional weight is the same. You don't feel like yourself. Your day feels haunted. You see things differently, like the dream tinted your vision. You laugh less. You check the locks twice. You walk past mirrors more quickly. That's the mark of a nightmare that never fully let go. So what do you do when your dream doesn't stay in the dark? How do you push it back? You can't always. Some nightmares dig in. They leave fingerprints. They reappear. They remind you that reality isn't as stable as we pretend it is. You can journal, meditate, talk to someone, ground yourself. But sometimes the best thing you can do is simply accept it, that maybe, just maybe, part of you is still in that dream, and part of it is still in you. Chapter 8. Nightmare beings across cultures. Not all nightmares are shapeless. Some come with faces, names, histories. And what's most disturbing is that across cultures, from ancient civilizations to modern folklore, people report seeing the same figures in their dreams. Shadowy entities, choking spirits, paralyzing presences, archetypes that transcend time and geography. These aren't just hallucinations, they are patterns, and patterns don't happen by accident. Let's start with one of the oldest nightmare myths in the Western world, the mare. The word nightmare doesn't come from night and scare. It comes from mare, an Old English term for a supernatural entity that would sit on your chest while you slept, suffocating you. This being wasn't necessarily evil, but it was feared, a spirit of pressure, dread, and helplessness, something that fed not on your soul, but on your breath. That same being appears in Norse legend as the Mara, in German as the Nachtmar, and in Slavic regions as the Mora. Different names, same behavior, same fear. Cross the ocean, and you'll find its cousin in Newfoundland, where they call her the Old Hag. Stories tell of people waking in the middle of the night, completely paralyzed, eyes open, heart racing, and seeing a hag-like figure sitting on their chest. No sound, no movement, just presence. These tales are so consistent, psychologists today use the term old hag syndrome to describe sleep paralysis accompanied by visual hallucination. But here's where things get strange. People who've never heard of the old hag, who don't even believe in the supernatural, report seeing her exact figure during sleep paralysis. Bent, female, pale, silent, familiar. How? Is it embedded in human psychology? Some deep archetypal fear? Or is it something else? In Japan, there's kanashibari, a term that refers both to sleep paralysis and the feeling of being bound or held down by invisible forces. In traditional Japanese folklore, this is often attributed to vengeful spirits, ghosts who use fear and stillness to exact retribution on the living. In Thailand, it's Fiam, a ghost that creeps over your chest while you sleep, just enough to stir you, not enough to fully wake you. In Mongolia, it's the Karin-Bu, a black shadow that whispers names. And in many parts of Africa, these beings are thought to be ancestral spirits, angry or grieving, visiting you in your most vulnerable state to send warnings or punishments. So why are these stories so similar? Why does a villager in rural Uganda describe the same nightmare figure as a stockbroker in downtown Tokyo? Skeptics will say the phenomenon is biological, that our brains, when deprived of mobility and flooded with fear hormones during sleep paralysis, invent a shape to assign the dread to. A shadow, a figure, something with eyes. But here's the problem. The features match too often. The experience is too consistent, and the emotion too pointed. These aren't just dreams. They feel like encounters. In some cultures, the beings are described not as tormentors, but as guardians. Fearsome figures who bring nightmares to warn, to protect, to shake you awake. The belief is that the dream is not an attack. It's a message. But in others, they're parasites. Beings who visit through cracks in your consciousness, who thrive on fear, who can only reach you when your mind is most open, most vulnerable, when you're not in control. One of the most reported modern figures in sleep paralysis and nightmares is simply called the Shadow Man. Tall, featureless, sometimes with a hat, always watching. People across the globe describe seeing him at the same distance, just inside the room, near the door. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He just stands there. And then he's gone. He has no name in any culture. Yet everyone knows who he is. Are these entities real, manifestations, collective hallucinations? We don't know. But we do know this. The fear is real. So is the paralysis. So are the tears people wake up crying. So is the relief when morning finally comes. And whether these figures are projections from our own subconscious or something darker, something older, they demand to be seen. They do not speak in words. They speak in stillness, in pressure, in repetition. So the next time you dream of something you've never seen before, but that still feels familiar, ask yourself, are you seeing it for the first time? Or remembering it from long ago? Because nightmares don't just come from inside you. Sometimes they knock. Chapter 9. Can you control a nightmare? You're in the dream again, the place you always end up. The thing you fear is close, just around the corner. You feel it, the dread, the helplessness, the repetition. But this time, something shifts. You realize you're dreaming. The rules start to bend. And now, for the first time, you can decide what happens next. This is the phenomenon known as lucid dreaming. The rare and powerful experience of becoming aware inside the dream. And yes, it can happen during a nightmare. In fact, for some people, it's the only way they ever learn to escape. Lucid dreaming has been studied for decades, but it's still largely misunderstood. It's not just realizing you're asleep. It's a split state, a unique moment where part of your conscious brain reactivates while your dream continues to unfold around you. And in that moment, you become a creator. The fear is still there, but now you're not running, you're deciding. What happens when you turn to face the monster? What happens when you say, "This is my dream, not yours"? Some nightmares dissolve instantly, others fight back, and in rare cases, they transform. People report confronting nightmare figures, shadow beings, pursuers, monstrous faces, only to have them speak, to tell them why they've been appearing, what they represent. In one documented case, a recurring dream demon stopped chasing the dreamer and said, simply, "You need to let go." He never returned again. Can nightmares carry messages? Lucid dream researchers think so. In fact, they believe this awareness may be the key to healing chronic nightmares, especially in people with trauma, PTSD, or recurring dream loops. In image rehearsal therapy, a clinical method for treating severe nightmares, patients are guided to rewrite their dream while awake. They change the ending, remove the fear, replace the threat with a solution, and with enough repetition, their brain starts to accept the new version. The nightmare loses its power, but lucidity takes it a step further. It gives you that control in real time. Of course, reaching that point isn't easy. Lucid dreaming requires training, discipline, and timing. Most people never achieve it without intention. But it's possible, and thousands of people are learning how to do it. The first step, remembering your dreams. Keep a journal. Write them down as soon as you wake. Even fragments, especially the terrifying ones. The more attention you give your dreams, the more vivid they become. Then, there are reality checks. Simple habits you build during the day that carry into your dreams. Try to push your finger through your palm. Ask yourself, am I dreaming? Look at a clock twice. It often changes in dreams. Look at text or reflections. They rarely stay stable. Eventually, you'll do one of these inside a dream, and something won't add up. And that's when you wake up inside the dream. But here's the catch. Lucid dreaming during a nightmare isn't always peaceful. Some people report that their awareness triggers the nightmare to escalate. That as soon as they realize they're dreaming, the dream responds, becoming more aggressive, more vivid, as if it's trying to push them back out. Others say lucid dreaming helped them conquer fears they've carried for decades. They stood up to the pursuer. They stepped off the cliff. They asked the voice in the darkness what it wanted, and it disappeared. One of the most common pieces of advice from experienced lucid dreamers. Ask the nightmare what it means. Not fight, not run, not escape. Ask, and you may be surprised by what it says. That's what makes lucid dreaming so mysterious. It's not just control, it's dialogue. A bridge between consciousness and something deeper. Maybe the subconscious, maybe memory, or maybe something we still don't understand. Some people believe lucid dreams are not dreams at all, that they are a kind of dimensional window, and that awareness allows you to peer into a version of reality where thought shapes matter. Others think that dreams are personal mythologies, and when you take control, you're not just playing God, you're confronting your own symbolic story. Can you control your nightmares? Not always, but if you prepare, if you become aware, sometimes you can change them. And sometimes, when you do, they change you. Because when you stop running and start listening, your nightmare stops being a prison. It becomes a mirror, and what you see in it may be the part of yourself you've avoided for far too long. Chapter 10. The theory no one talks about. By now, you've learned the science, the symbolism, the psychology. But there's one theory that we haven't touched. It's not in most textbooks. You won't find it on health blogs. It doesn't come up in therapy sessions, at least not the kind covered by insurance. Because this theory doesn't offer comfort. It doesn't tell you your nightmares are just electrical misfires. It doesn't say they're trauma processing. It doesn't tell you they're just dreams. Number. This theory says, what if nightmares are real? Not physically real, but experientially real. What if your consciousness isn't locked in your skull while you sleep? What if it's moving through something else? Something bigger, something darker. Let's rewind. Most dreams are nonsensical. Disconnected scenes, strange imagery, fractured logic. But nightmares? Nightmares feel different, focused, directed, like they have intention. Sometimes you're not just reacting, you're being shown something, a place, a face, a truth you don't understand. What if that's not your mind? What if it's someone else's? There's a theory among fringe researchers and lucid dreamers that dreams are not created but tuned into, like signals. And nightmares, they're interference, noise, crossed wires from realities that aren't supposed to overlap. You're seeing something you shouldn't, feeling something from somewhere else, and your brain, unable to process it, translates it into fear. That's why it feels wrong. Not unfamiliar, but wrong. Like the hallway that shouldn't be there. The figure that knows your name. the memory you don't remember living. In this view, nightmares aren't about your fears. They are interactions, brief collisions with things beyond your understanding. And your terror, it's the residue of contact. Think about it. Why do some nightmares come out of nowhere? No trauma, no stress, no triggers, just terror. Why do you see places you've never been over and over in exact detail? Why do people dream of disasters before they happen? Of deaths before the phone rings? Coincidence? Pattern seeking? Or something else? There are stories, not many but enough, of people who dreamed of events exactly as they occurred days later, who described people they'd never met, spoke languages they don't know, woke up with knowledge they couldn't explain. Some call it premonition. Others say it's leakage, fragments from adjacent timelines. Nightmares, then, aren't wrong. They're unfamiliar because they're not native to you. You're witnessing something you weren't meant to see. But here's the most disturbing part of this theory. What if you aren't alone in the dream? What if some of the beings you encounter, the faceless figure, the whispering voice, the shadow man at the edge of the hallway, aren't symbols at all? What if they're watching you back? There are thousands of reports of people encountering figures in their dreams that felt different. Not like a construct, not like a memory, but like a presence, something outside their own mind, something aware. They wake up shaken, not because of what they saw, but because of the feeling. That wasn't part of me. That thing saw me. Is this fantasy? A trick of the mind? Or a nightmare's two-way windows? Brief moments of connection between you and something else. Maybe they're beings. Maybe they're fragments of yourself. Or maybe they're echoes from what's on the other side of death. The side your mind tiptoes into while your body rests. In ancient cultures, dreams were sacred. Nightmares were messages, warnings, portals. Sometimes punishments. We treat them as glitches. Maybe that's our mistake. Because here's the theory no one talks about. Your nightmare might not be trying to scare you. Your nightmare might be trying to tell you something. About where you are, about what you are, about what's coming. And you keep waking up before you hear the end. So the next time you close your eyes and fall into the dark, don't run, don't fight, just listen. Because the nightmare might be more than just fear. It might be the truth.